Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to the Ready to Bloom podcast, which features interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, without further ado, I'll hand you over to your host, Holly Worden.
Hello and welcome to the Ready to Bloom podcast, episode 114. This is your host, Holly Worden, and I'm here with today's special guest, Meg Worden. Meg is a writer, speaker, coach, and advocate of social justice. Welcome, Meg.
Hi, Holly. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on the show today. Thanks for coming on.
Likewise.
So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today with your business?
Okay, so my business is a absolute gift. It's just about my favorite thing that is happening in my life. It's kind of the thing that I always wanted to do when I grew up, but it hadn't been invented yet because there was no internet. So I had no idea how I was I sort of had this idea of these disparate things. Like I knew I would talk to people and I knew I would sort of kind of teach in some way. And I knew health was going to be a part of it. And all the things and writing would be a part of it. But I never imagined that just one of those things would happen. And I never was able until I started my business to really see how those things would coalesce. And even it was until I started my business, which I'll be honest was the result of, kind of a bit of desperation. I really needed my life to work for me as a single mother and as a person that doesn't necessarily look super great on paper. I didn't finish college. I had some things that were not working in my favor when it came to getting a job that was going to pay me a sustainable wage. Mm-hmm. And I have always been quite entrepreneurial and somebody who will find a way. So when it came to figuring out what I was going to do for a living, I just went into hustle mode and started putting things together and started doing the research and found out that I could market a business online. I went through couple different incarnations as a yoga teacher, and now I'm a health coach, but the yoga teaching didn't pay the bills. And so I had to figure out how to raise my game and did go to nutrition school, which also helped give me some resources online. And I went down a few rabbit holes that led me to a world that said, you can work from home on your laptop and you can do all of these things that include writing and speaking and helping people and working with amazing people that you would never ordinarily find and be able to actually make a living and be a single mom. So that happened. So a combination of like being a late bloomer and having some crazy life-altering experiences that didn't make me any more employable, we'll say that. And I was going through a divorce and just was like, I am going to make it work. Like there is nothing that's going to stop me from having what I need in life. I just was not prepared to go slave for minimum wage. Just was not going to happen. It was a non-negotiable. So my business really rose out of a sense of need and an absolute determination that I wasn't going to accept the status quo, that I was going to find a way to be in charge of my own life.
And I imagine that as a single mom, this gave you the perfect opportunity to make money from home and create the schedule that you need around your son.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And my son has some, sort of special learning needs and is currently needing to be homeschooled. And so that is, I just can't imagine how I would take care of him if I wasn't able to do this from home. So I'm very grateful. And it's the result of, I'm not one of those people who sat around and I thought, let me make a business plan and really plan this out. I was sort of really in the crucible of it thinking, okay, I'm going to, turn this piece of iron into gold and I have no idea how it's going to work, but these are the things I need. I need to be able to be at home. I need to be able to make X amount of money. I need to be able to have a free schedule, and I need my work to, and as if I'm not already asking for too much, I really need my work to have a whole bunch of meaning and never be annoying to me. So
That's a
I was
pretty big
literally
ask, and I
going
think
for
you
the
found
goal,
it.
right?
Yeah. So how did you
And
manage?
utilize all my skills, and I don't want to do the things I don't want to do.
Excellent. That's a big list. So how did you manage to pull together all of your experience as a yoga teacher, nutrition, and pull all of this into what you're doing today as a health coach? How did that come together?
Well, those things are pretty related,
Yeah.
you know. So it wasn't too far of a leap from being a yoga teacher to being to doing health coach. I mean, a lot of what I do as a health coach, food is like the secondary piece of what usually is keeping people from healing food issues. Food issues are generally a side effect of being starved in some other area of life. So it's not too far of a leap. I use my training as a yoga teacher quite frequently it's like yoga on the phone. It's like talking yoga. You know, I'm not telling people, I mean, I do prescribe yoga to some extent, but that's not for everyone. Being a yoga teacher really taught me how to show up and hold the room for someone and let them do their work inside of it and really create a leak-free container for that, and also separate my own ego from it. So like I really am able to, it taught me to be able to allow people to it taught me the power of what happens when people are in a space where they feel extremely safe and where their highest potential is mirrored to them and where they're given good, solid direction, but the work is all theirs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I like that.
So the yoga was definitely a step towards what I'm doing. So when I went to nutrition school, it was something I did very much. It felt like something I did to expound on what I was already doing. Of course, the money-making element was in there, but it was something that happened, you know, as an additional. It was more like I just grew in that career rather than changed it. So it wasn't so crazy. But I mean, I've been a waitress and a bartender and a hairstylist and a landscaper and a whole bunch of other things. But that was more just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Right. And when it came to just actually realizing that I wanted a career, and I had been through, you know, it's a pretty typical story of having been through a lot of personal healing myself and getting to a place where being able to offer that to other people was a kind of natural progression and a natural desire. I mean, I think a lot of people, when you go through really hard things, there's a feeling on the other side of it that you can help other people with stuff. So, you know, that was certainly in there for me. And also just like, here's what I do well. So let me just stick with what I know, right?
So with your health coaching, is that kind of a blend of, as you said, nutrition and health and lifestyle and well-being, kind of a holistic approach, or?
Very holistic. My clients tend to be my clients tend to be women, in large part, women who really know their way around a Whole Foods market. Like my clients are no stranger to exercise classes and yoga and, you know, Whole Foods and eating well and making smoothies and those kinds of things. Oftentimes, you know, they're also still binge eating, or they're doing those things from, you know, you can make all the kale smoothies that you want, but if you drink them because you hate yourself, they're not going to help you, you know. And we live in a culture that's pretty rough on women, and women learn to be really rough on themselves. Yeah. And we also live in a culture that is hyper promotional of what being a good person looks like, and that looks like exercising and drinking kale smoothies and doing all the things, and adding all the things to a to-do list is a really stressful project. Yes. So I don't spend a lot of time teaching people that they need to drink kale smoothies. I honestly spend the bulk of my time in client sessions teaching people that they don't have to drink kale smoothies to be good people. And then when we get to a place where they're sourcing from a more embodied place, where they're feeling more like doing things because they love themselves and eating well and exercising and doing good things actually is a benefit, is like a gift to these bodies that carry them around. Mm-hmm. That is then we're talking about a whole different kind of health. We just raise that game for them, and they're really coming from a place of choosing what they want to do for themselves rather than the list of, I must do all the things to, right?
Yes.
To even be even a little bit lovable.
Yeah.
Once we can get to a place where we figure out, where else in their life they're feeling uncomfortable or starving. So it's a lot of life coaching, but I love being a health coach because talking about the basics of nutrition are the underpinnings of everything. They're just, it's such an easy way to be present. We hear all these memes like, be present, be in the now, like empowerment stuff. But unless you really know how to do that, like from a pragmatic perspective, it tends to stay out in the ether. It actually tends to end up being another thing on the to-do list. After I drink these 17 kale smoothies, I need to be here now, right? Oh my God, I'm not present.
You have to meditate for an hour and a half.
Right, super stressful. So I'm so stressed out. Like I'm rushing around just trying to be present. So it's exhausting, and that's not the point.
Yeah. So
health stuff, like getting to a place where you can really like get to the very, very, very basic building blocks and fundamentals of what it means to be embodied, what it means to walk around in a body, what that body needs, your particular body. Like once we get all that stuff unpacked and cleared up and really simplified so that we're doing just those super simple things, like major changes happen, and then it's like a real, actual physical kinesthetic feeling of what it means to be coming from a place of embodiment. Empowerment actually means something. Being present actually means being inside your body and not being all over the world, thinking about what everyone else thinks about you or what you're supposed to be doing to please them. And so it's really nice to be able to have those tools to just like, how are you sleeping? What are you hydrated? Yeah. What are you hungry for? Those kinds of things become the most incredible tools for everything.
Yes.
So I really enjoy keeping the health coaching part, but I'm not, it's a little bit vague sometimes because I know there's many health coaches that the whole point is to just tell you to eat kale and to run a bunch of miles or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's sort of it's not the people that are attracted to me. We do all that stuff, but on the other side of the other stuff. Then it's like if they still want to lose the weight or whatever, then we put in a food and exercise plan. But I don't do that for people who are self-loathing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. There's something more that needs to be addressed here.
Right, exactly.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about how transformational truth-telling can help your business. So I'd like to start out by asking you, what is transformational truth-telling and how would you define it?
So transformational truth-telling, I think it's probably pretty connected to what I was just talking about, actually, is what does it look like to really, when we're talking about transformational truth-telling, I think the first thing I think about when you say that is being able to really own the entirety of your being, your life story, really occupy your own space, which starts with your body, so that would be a nice segue. But to occupy your body space, the shape of you in the world, to occupy the shape of your life in the world, who you are as a parent or a sister or a daughter, son, or an entrepreneur, So oftentimes I'm assuming that many of the people listening to this podcast are probably entrepreneurs and the kind of entrepreneurs that are, if there's any other kind where you're not completely enmeshed in your business and it's like an extension of who you are and all of your like fears about who you are as a person tend to come up in your business. Being able to really occupy the entire spectrum of your story or your behaviors and your fears, and some of the fears that are true, the ways that you show up both constructively and sometimes destructively when you're up against a wall. Like, I think when it comes to transformational truth telling, being able to really articulate, at the very least, to yourself the whole truth of who you are is incredibly transformational. To say, you know what, I am actually super selfish and insecure, or man, I am a compassionate person and I really want to be compassionate, but man, I'm super judgmental. I try to be punctual, but also I'm a super huge flake. Whatever. I mean, we spend so much time going, no, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
I'm perfect. I'm perfect.
I'm compassionate. I'm compassionate. Positive self-talk, right?
Yeah.
Also, we're all the other things too. And that makes us human. And it's very scary to show up like that when people rely on you to be whatever it is, coachy, healthy, have it all together, be a person who's telling other people how to live. Like, there's a lot, then even more pressure. But the fact is, it is the most powerful and transformational thing to be able to stop trying to hide those things about yourself and really get to ground zero, get to a neutral place. Like, all the things about you are simply human. They are not bad or good or lovable and unlovable. They are just what make up you as a person. So when I think about transformational truth telling, I think about the ability to be able to face the shadow parts of yourself and tell the truth about them, even if that's just to yourself, which everybody does not have to be gutting them, all of their secrets all over the internet.
Yeah.
Let's be clear.
Yes, definitely. So how has transformational truth telling helped you and your business?
So it's been an interesting ride. So, as you know, I won't spend a whole bunch of time on this story because people can find out about it online, and certainly it could take over the whole podcast. But back over, let's see, 10 plus years ago, I was released from 2 years of serving time in federal prison for selling ecstasy. And when I started my business, so, there's a whole host of stories about that, as you might imagine, and it's a good story. I taught yoga in prison, and, there's all kinds of like really huge growth that went into that. And I do love to tell the story and write about it and all those things. And because of that, and because of also a desire to tell that story, I'm also a writer. So when I got out of prison, I had a real strong desire to write about it, as one might. And I felt even a responsibility to write about it as a person who is not the most heavily populated race and class of people to be in prison. As a white female, the responsibility to tell a story when people, I tell my story and nobody ever looks at me and says, oh, well, of course you were in prison. And, if I were, for instance, a Black person in the United States, that is quite often, sadly, the response. And as a white woman, I get, oh, you must have been going through such a hard time. And also other people who don't realize what's going on in our justice system connect to me. And they are able to first make a connection, then find out a thing about me. And when they do, their paradigm is forced to be shifted. And so because I wanted to write about it and tell this story, I started doing that. And before I started my health coaching business, I was writing memoir, and I was redoing live readings. That's, after doing it I started to get published online, and then I started to do live readings, and then I started to do live storytelling events, and they made it to radio and some things like that. So when I started my business, I had this story that I had in the world and on the internet. And, I've worked very hard to tell that story without shame for a lot of reasons, starting with my son and ending with my newfound recognition after starting this project that being able to tell our stories without shame is an incredibly, incredibly powerful gift to ourselves and each other. So And I didn't know that until I started telling the story and started to see what was happening with other people. And the responsibility felt greater to tell the story in more of ways that, like I was saying earlier, are able to like hold the room for people so that they can have an experience of how they translate the story. Like it no longer is mine. So here I have this story out on the internet, and I want to start a business on the internet. And not only do I want to start a business on the internet, but I want to start a health business where I'm going to tell people things about how to live a healthy life. Mm-hmm. And I was pretty uncertain, in beginning the business. I was very concerned about what people thought about me, and I wanted to make a good impression, and I wanted people to trust me. And I was very uncertain, when you start something and you're green and you really have to like talk people into trusting you because you don't have a track record. I didn't know how to do that. And I was very scared that my story that I had online was going to scare people away, or that if I didn't own it somehow, like how do I put that on my health coaching website? Like that seemed weird. And then what if somebody hired me and then they Googled me and they found these other stories, and then our relationship would be weird because they wouldn't know if they should mention it. Like how would that ever be comfortable for a client to say, well, I Googled you and found out that you weren't, like, everything about it was like didn't feel like that was okay for the kind of client relationships I wanted to create. So that was my real motivation, was like, how do I make sure that my clients are in a totally leak-free space? Because that's the only way I think that this work can be done.
Yes.
And if I want them to trust me, right, I have to make sure they are safe. The end, like without any kind of variance from that. So I consulted with some copywriters and branders, and the advice was pretty across the board to put that on my about page, and it was terrifying. And I did it anyway. And so for me, the experience of transformational truth telling in my business was a really big, obvious story that I actually kind of had, again, forced to tell. Like everything sort of come about in a like, how do I solve this weird, impossible problem? And there must be a way. And so I put it on the about page, and I like wrote some blog posts about it and stuff. And it ended up being like unbelievably amazing for my business, because it has not only made my business even more about narrative and storytelling, which is like just like nutrition. It's like the underpinning. It's what we're feeding our brains all day, are the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we pay attention to that people are telling us. So it has given my business added depth and dimension and things that I can talk about. And also, the feedback I get is that people really feel like they're entering into a space where nothing they say is going to be judged, where there's something very approachable. So this terrifying thing, like it might not be the same for everybody. Like I'm definitely not giving the advice that like if you've done something terrible in your life, you should put it on your about page. I'm also not saying I did something terrible. I have feelings about that, but that's not the advice I'm giving here. This is like really just like a gross big example of how the fear of saying something that would very ordinarily be a stigmatized, shameful thing, or would maybe feel like something you would want to put in the shadows, the ability to tell that story in a way that continues to hold the room, even if it's just holding the room being the shape and space of your own life and how you occupy it so that you can show up for other people, is an incredibly transformational process. It changed my business. I mean, it's changed my clients are fantastic. It beyond my wildest dreams. Immediately was sort of like, wow, this actually does the opposite of make people not like me. Brene Brown, as everyone probably knows who that is, wrote in her book Daring Greatly that vulnerability is the last thing we want to show other people, and it is the first thing we want to see in other people. And that, I think, is a really powerful statement when we're talking about transformational truth telling, because we actually, if we want to make legitimate connections with people. And of course, professional, personal, and intimate connections are very different. But if we legitimately want to make authentic connections with other people, we have to open our heart. We have to show some vulnerability if that's what we want to get back. And that means we have to first and foremost be able to be in a full place of truth with our own truth.
Yeah.
Truthy about our truth, right?
So, Meg, what are your top tips on how our women listeners can tell their story without shame, including the shadow parts that they might be afraid of?
So my favorite tips, I think I've overstated maybe, but to take care of your health. First and foremost, the fundamental self-care stuff. And I really steer away from like living a life of navel gazing. Health is not the end game. I'm talking about basic needs every day to physically remind yourself that you are okay and you are worth caring for. Because that's the fundamentals of being able to actually be okay with the parts of you that people might not like. Yeah. You might not like. Your mom might not have liked. Whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, eat things that are alive, drink water, get good sleep, move your body, and do things that are stillness related. I think about owning your story and the ways that your story is actually, the whole thing is neutral. There is no bad or good. Listen to yourself, talk to yourself. Listen to yourself, talk to other people. Do you say to people, oh my God, I know this is going to sound crazy and you're going to hate me, but every time you say something, do you say, oh, I'm so sorry, but, do you walk around the world apologizing? Do you walk around the world disclaiming everything you say as being stupid and crazy and wrong? Like that's just one example of the kinds of ways that like we discount our own stories, or we try to like quickly cut people off at the pass of having any opinion of us at all, but one that we are comfortable with, which is that we are bad and wrong and crazy.
And everyone else is right. Everyone else is perfect. Right. We're the wrong ones.
Right. So listening to that kind of stuff and seeing if you can edit it out, it's a really good practice to say stuff and just have a period at the end of it. Like, I am selfish. Sometimes I am selfish. Like, that doesn't have to be followed with, and it really sucks, and blah, 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 into the well of like, I'm a worthless human being. Like, everything we do, oh, I was late. Like, if it's appropriate to apologize, but like also, yeah, I didn't leave in time to get there. Like, I misjudged the time it would take and I was late. The end. Like, you might apologize to someone else about it, but like in your own mind, it's not like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. I'm such a flake. I can't believe I did. Like, a lot of noise. Yeah. A lot of noise with value judgments. So to start to get to a place where your story is neutral, just state the facts. I'm just going to state the facts. Like, can you, as best as you can, when you're speaking to other people or in your own head, it's helpful sometimes to write things down. How can you turn these facts that are then followed, like a 3 or 5 word sentence that is followed by a 50-minute value judgment tirade? Like, just think of the time you can save, So that's my tip.
Great.
Tips.
Thank you. No, I think that's excellent. I think that gives people a really important kind of foundation to work from. So that's great. So, Meg, do you have any women business mentors? Are there any women entrepreneurs who inspire you? Perhaps any women that you know of that have really gotten into telling their story without shame?
I would have to say that I am definitely a big fan of Brene Brown. Like I mentioned, I continue, no matter how big she gets, to enjoy her work immensely. I'm also fans of some people that aren't super famous. There's a woman named Desiree Adaway who has a business online, who is such a powerful force in the work of social justice activism, which is certainly near and dear to my heart. equality, racism and business, things like that. She is just an absolute inspiration to me. There's a woman named Rachel Rice, who is an artist, also an activist, who these are two people that just cut through the BS and they're able to tell the truth and balance both a sense of importance for personal development without it being an end in itself, that it's not a navel gazing circle of privileged people just trying to get more green juice into the day or make another, painting or whatever. Not that anything of those things are bad in themselves, but how can we actually use self-improvement and art and activism to then go out and serve the world? The end game is, how can we be a better culture? How can we be a better collective? How can we be a better community? How can we be better neighbors? Super great, you want to be a better person, but what's the point if you're not actually going to be a better member of the human race? So there's a lot out there about being just a better person and going to yet another retreat about you. But I'm really, really inspired by people who take it to the next level and are able to really tell the truth in a way that's both compassionate and action-based and really real, So Desiree Attaway and Rachel Rice, I would say, lead the show for me.
Right. Well, thank you. So, Meg, how can other women benefit from working with you? I know you've got a free program online, Free Your Mind, Your Ass Will Follow, and you've got some other options as well. Tell us about that.
I do. So that's, if you go to my website, megworden.com, and sign up for my email list, it's really sits right there in the sidebar that says you get that little free e-course. And honestly, it's basically everything I was just talking about. It's the fundamentals of taking care of yourself and embodying your space. There are many invitations in that free offer to work with me. I've got 2 groups coming up. I'm just working on the sales page for my holiday group. That's always really fun. It's about doing less. And it's called something about having gravy and grace in the holidays. Good grief. I don't even know my own stuff. See, imperfection for the win. So that I'm going to have another group starting in January. Following my stuff is really the best way. And I do private coaching, which is also, everything we just talked about. It's not magic, but it's a whole lot like it. I definitely, I do free consultations happily for any of your listeners. So
excellent.
If anyone just wants to reach out, if they feel like anything we've talked about really speaks to them, I would just, no pressure, happy to just connect and get on the phone with any of your people that might want to just talk more about what would work for them.
Well, thank you. And tell us a little bit about salad alchemy. I love the concept of that. You made salad sound really exciting.
It's so cute. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's, I wrote that years ago. That was one of the first things that I wrote. That's one of the only little products I put out there. I'm pretty focused on just doing the coaching, but it's just adorable. It's a little book that has 12 salads in it, like the creativity salad and the, creativity salad, genius salad, salads that have the ingredients in them that actually support some kind of emotional space or whatever. I'll send it to you. You can give it to all your people if you want.
Oh, thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you. Great. I'll add that to the show notes then.
Yeah,
thanks.
Definitely. Figure that out. I'll make sure that you get that and anybody who listens can have it.
Well, thank you. That's very generous. So, Meg, you've mentioned your website a couple of minutes ago, but where else can people find you online? What are your main social networks?
I have my favorites. My favorite right now is Instagram.
Yes.
At Meg Worden. It's mostly just pictures of pretty stuff I like. I mean, it's not a lot of inspirational quotes, but I love connecting on Instagram because I think that it's really all about how we live our life. I'm a big fan of surrounding ourselves with beauty and comfort. Instagram is at Meg Worden. Twitter is at Meg Worden. I have a Facebook page, Feed Me Darling. And my website, megworden.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Holly. This is my favorite topic. So
Yay.
thank you very much for letting me talk on and on about it.
You're welcome. I could talk to you forever about it. So it's really, really good to get your wisdom about this, because I think this is something a lot of women entrepreneurs struggle with. It's like we've all got that shadow side that we want to kind of push down and sweep it under the rug and pretend that it doesn't exist, but it's part of who we are.
Yeah, and it's actually part of what the people that are going to hire you want from you.
Yeah.
They don't want your perfection. It intimidates them.
Of course.
They actually want to know that you're real and you have the same struggles as they do.
Yeah.
And there's always a way to be able to do that.
Yeah, very well put. So thank you again for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. And remember to visit readytobloom.com/114 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ready to Bloom podcast with your host, Holly Worden. You can find more information about today's guests, including links for topics that were discussed at readytobloom.com. That's ready, 2, bloom.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave us a quick review of this podcast. Thank you so much.